This is it. This is where we're at today. Yikes. So a few days ago, I was sitting on a panel for like second years who were thinking about doing graduate school, and it kind of got me thinking. This is just going to be some tips, I guess, for if you're thinking about doing grad school. So without further ado, let's start. Okay. All right. So tip number 1 is give yourself plenty of time. If you are actually in the process of applying or you want to apply, make sure you allow yourself plenty of time to think about stuff, figure stuff out, do the applications. I mean, if you're applying and your deadline's in December, you should really be thinking about your application in August, September, and vice versa. So at least 3, 4, 5, 6 months in advance if you can. Just because there's a lot to think about if you are applying to grad school, especially if it's not at the university that you did your undergraduate degree at. And also, you're most likely going to need references, so you need to let your references know in advance that they're going to need to write letters, and you want to give them enough time. You don't want to give them 2 days and be like, here, can you write me a reference letter in 2 days? It's due. So I would usually try and give my references a month's notice at least. So tip number 2 is do your research. Figure out if you have an idea about where you want to go or what you want to do your research about the school, about the field, because you're gonna need it. I mean, it seems obvious, but you want to understand, if you see a program that you're interested in, you want to understand as much as you can about the program, how the program works, what you're gonna need to proceed into the program, what they want from you in terms of like an application. So don't just kind of go in blindly be like, oh, I'm going to apply to this school and then just do generic letters. Like you can't, when you apply to schools, they can tell whether you've written some generic letter for a bunch of different schools or if you've tailored it and stuff like that. So make sure you're aware of what graduate school is going to be like, what's required. And this is going to come down to a couple of like other tips, I guess I'll give you kind of further along. Okay, so tip number 3 is get experience as much as you can. So what I did was I did a bunch of different research projects and got as much experience as possible, because not only does this just give you, I guess, research experience, which will help you if you like want to apply to graduate school, showing you have the experience is good, but it also shows you what you do and don't like, and you kind of get to work with different groups of people and see how different types of research are being done in different labs. And you can also kind of learn about what good lab environments are and aren't. And in another project I did, I actually didn't really like it too much, and that was just because of the lab environment and the mentorship style of the people in the lab, and that's completely fine as well. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't gotten more experience as well. So it helps you in a lot of different ways. Either whether you can get repetitive research projects in the same lab, or if you can do different projects in different labs. My key bit of advice is just get as much experience as you can. So tip number 4 is figure out why you are thinking or why you want to do graduate school. Graduate school is a big step, and it's not something you want to just step into blindly, because it is a big commitment. And if you're doing it just because you're like, I want to get a job, I hate to break it to you, just because you have a PhD at the end or a master's degree then doesn't mean you're going to get a job. Yeah, it's a really big commitment, and just being like, oh, well, I don't know what I want to do next, so I'm just going to do graduate school, is also not necessarily the best thing. And it works for some people. Give yourself some time off at some point, even if it's just a half a year. Most programs you can start like halfway through the year, or even like they have admission like 3 times a year. So half a year isn't going to kill you. It's probably going to help you in the long run, because you've given yourself that time off and that time to consider about whether or not this is right for you. So next tip is talk to people. communicate. No, ask questions. Speak to like a variety of people about graduate school in general. So when I was first thinking about it, I actually talked to one of my professors. That he taught one of my classes, and I was just asking him some questions about it, and he gave me some useful insight. I also spoke to a lot of the people in the labs that I was doing my undergraduate projects in. So I'd ask a lot of PhD students, hey, what are you doing? Do you like it? Would you do it again? If like you could go back in time, would you start your PhD or would you not do it? Just understanding how the PhD process works or the master's process works, seeing what their thoughts are, see if they have any advice or recommendations, because they're in those positions right now and they're doing what you are thinking about doing in a few years' time. Talk to as many people as you can at the place that you're thinking of going. So obviously if you're interested in a lab and you could talk to the professor about it, but also try and talk to people in the lab or people who have worked with them in the past, because they can tell you what the lab environment's like, what the mentoring style of the professor is like. Cool. Next one, and this is a pretty big one, is understand the funding situation for where you're applying or where you're thinking of going. The funding situation between schools and departments, let alone universities, let alone countries, is super different and super varied. So you really need to do your research on the funding situation, because a PhD, especially if it's a PhD, but even a master's, is essentially like a full-time job. You're usually committing a minimum of 40 hours a week. It's also because sometimes, depending on where you're applying, your funding might not be tied in with your program. Quite often those deadlines are earlier than your application for your actual program. So if you're looking for scholarships, the scholarship scholarship cycle might actually be earlier than when your program cycle is. If you see a cool scholarship or a program that you want to apply to and you can apply to it, do. Even if you don't think you're going to get it, even if you don't fit, say, every single box, apply anyway, because you never know that whether you'll get it or not. And I know it's like, oh, well, there are so many people better than me. But the thing is, like, you'd be surprised by how many people think like that and then don't actually apply. So I think I applied to 5 or 6 schools, and I actually got into my top school and then my lowest school, if that makes sense in terms of rankings. So all the ones in the middle I didn't get into, but I managed to get into the top school and the bottom school. So hopefully that can kind of show you that even if like the second school doesn't take you, your second top school won't take you, but the first one might. So I had to toss up between the 2 schools, and I decided to go to the one that I thought was best for me, which ended up being the lower school. It's not even a low school, but it's the lower school. So you never know unless you try. So unless it's like something where you have to, like if you have to pay ridiculous amounts to apply and you can't afford it, then don't do it. But take a chance, because you never know. So next tip, I'm not sure where we're at. I think it might be 7 or 8. Try and develop, or I guess nourish, soft skills or non-academic skills as well as your academic skills. So there's this big focus on, developing your research skills and your scientific skills, but other skills like leadership, communication, time management, interpersonal skills, they're super important as well. Regardless of whether you do decide to go and do graduate school or not, you could, join a student body, be in a student council, could help run or organize events. But try and kind of keep your options broad, because it'll help you in real life, but if you decide that graduate school isn't for you, you can still use these skills, and even if you decide it is right for you, you'll still use them. My second last tip, I guess, recognize that there are flaws and problems in the system in terms of graduate school, from lack of funding to sometimes lack of job prospects. It is very stressful, and it can be a toxic environment if you somehow find yourself in not the best lab environment, regardless of whether it's the people that you're working with, your supervisor, your department, the expectations that are put on you. There are a lot of issues with academia and research, especially as PhD students. You're expected to publish data, which adds extra stress. It's hard to balance your research life with a personal life, and being able to separate the two is hard. So again, you don't want to go in blindly thinking that it's going to be this amazing thing, because it won't necessarily be. And then finally, it's okay to not go to grad school. And it's okay if you do go to grad school and then you decide it's not right for you and you want to leave. Plans change, or your circumstances change, or you just realize that as much as you like doing research, say in undergraduate, you don't like it at the graduate level, and that is okay. You need to do what's right for you and what's gonna help you, not only in just like your career and stuff like that, but you need to do what's right for your happiness, your mental health, your overall health. It's just like anything. It's like you start a new job. If you don't like the job, you don't have to stay in the job. So don't feel stuck. And you can listen to people's advice all you want, but you do you and look after yourself. Hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions about grad school, or I guess moving overseas, being an international student in grad school, it's a different experience. Feel free to ask me down below, or over on my Instagram, which I'll link down below. I'm more active on my Instagram. Yeah. I mean, you can subscribe if you want. But yeah, okay. Alright, well, I'll see you all later. Bye. I should not have worn this sweater with this couch. The people were just like walking around above me. Can you... Welcome. If you've somehow ended up here and thought, how the hell did I get here? Yeah, me too. I'll just... Okay.